My son slid a paper across the table and said, "Just sign here." One sentence on that page changed everything. I was 72 years old that morning, and until then, I believed I knew my own life. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. Forgettable. The kind of day that doesn't announce itself. The sun was up, but soft, filtered through thin clouds that promised rain later. My knees ached in the familiar way, the kind you stop complaining about because it never really goes away. The radio played low in the background, filling the house with noise so it wouldn't feel so empty. I live alone now. Have for years. My husband passed suddenly when our son was still a boy. After that, life became about doing what needed to be done. Working longer hours, learning how to stretch a dollar, teaching a child how to grow up while still figuring things out yourself. His name is Caleb Mercer, my only child. I raised him to be careful, responsible, respectful, or at least I thought I did. If someone had asked me that morning whether I trusted him, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have said yes without a second thought. I would have laughed at the idea that my own son could ever hurt me. That's the thing about trust. You don't notice it until it's tested. The knock came earlier than usual. Not the relaxed tap Caleb normally used, the one that said, "It's just me." This was different. 3 firm knocks, evenly spaced, like someone with a schedule. I remember pausing with my hand on the coffee pot, wondering why that small detail made my chest feel tight. When I opened the door, Caleb stood there, holding a thick manila folder. He looked put together. Clean jacket, neatly combed hair, but his smile felt stiff, like something he'd practiced on the drive over. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Sorry if I woke you." "No," I replied. "I was already up." That was a lie, but mothers tell those. We don't want to seem fragile. He stepped inside without waiting, already scanning the room, already moving with purpose. "I brought some paperwork," he said, lifting the folder slightly. Paperwork. That word alone settled heavy in my stomach. I motioned toward the kitchen. "You want coffee?" "No time," he said quickly. "This'll only take a minute." That should have been my first real warning. Caleb always had time for coffee, always sat down, always talked first. He placed the folder on the table and slid out a single page. Crisp, clean, like it had never been folded. "Just sign here," he said, tapping the bottom line with his finger. "1 sentence, that's it." I sat down slowly. My knees complained the whole way. "What's it for?" I asked. He shrugged, casual. "Just so I can help you better. Doctors, banks, that kind of stuff." I looked at the paper, then back at him. "I can't read this without my glasses," I said. "You don't need to," he replied too quickly. "It's standard." I reached for my glasses anyway. He stopped me. "Mom," he said, firmer now. "It's fine. I already read it." Something about the way he said that made my fingers freeze in midair. "I'd still like you to read it to me," I said quietly. He sighed, clearly irritated, but picked up the paper. He read fast, too fast. Legal phrases rushed past without explanation. Words like authorization and representation floated through the air but never settled. When he finished, he placed the pen in my hand. "See? Nothing to worry about." I stared at the page. "Why does it say effective immediately?" I asked. "That's normal," he replied. "And this part," I said, tracing a line with my finger. "What does 'in all matters' mean?" He hesitated, just for a moment. "It just covers everything, so there are no problems later." Problems. I swallowed. "Caleb," I said slowly, "are you saying I won't be making my own decisions anymore?" He laughed, quick, sharp. "Don't be dramatic." That word landed wrong. I wasn't dramatic. I'd survived worse than this.
I'd buried a husband, raised a child alone, and kept a roof over our heads. Dramatic wasn't the word for me. I think I should have my lawyer look at this. The air in the room shifted. His jaw vanished. Why would you do that? He asked. Just to be safe. He leaned forward now, lowering his voice. That's not necessary. It'll just complicate things. Complicate what? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he nudged the pen closer. Just sign here, he said again. The pen felt heavier than it should have. I thought about every time I'd trusted him without question, every time I'd stepped back because he said he had it handled, every small decision I'd handed over without realizing it. For a moment, I almost signed. Almost. Then my eyes caught a sentence halfway down the page, one he hadn't read out loud. I leaned closer, forcing my tired eyes to focus, and as I read that sentence slowly, carefully, my breath caught, because it didn't sound like help, it sounded like permission. Permission to decide where I lived, permission to speak for me, permission to act instead of me. I set the pen down. I'm not signing this today. His jaw tightened. Mom, not today, I repeated. That night, I didn't sign the paper, but I didn't sleep either, because the next morning I made a phone call my son never expected, and when I read that sentence out loud, the woman on the other end of the line went completely silent. She didn't ask for clarification. She didn't tell me to relax. She didn't say only one thing: do not sign anything else. And that was the moment I realized how close I'd come to losing control of my own life.
The woman on the phone was Marilyn Holt. I had known her for years. She helped me update my will after my husband passed and handled a small property matter once when a neighbor dispute got out of hand. She was calm, steady, and never dramatic. The kind of person who didn't raise her voice because she never needed to. When she finally spoke again, her tone was careful. "Elaine," she said, "did you sign that document?" "No," I replied. "Not yet." "Good," she said immediately. "I need you to listen to me very closely." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. "That sentence you just read is not harmless. It gives your son authority to act on your behalf in nearly every aspect of your life." My throat felt dry. "I said it was just to help," I whispered. "I'm sure he did," Marilyn replied. "But words like full authority and in all matters are not casual. They are specific, and they are powerful." I looked down at the paper lying on the table. "What happens if I sign it?" I asked. There was a pause. "You would be giving up your legal right to make independent decisions," she said, immediately. My stomach tightened. "About everything?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "Your finances, your residence, your medical care, even who can speak for you." I felt the room tilt slightly. "That can't be right," I said. "There has to be some limit." "There isn't," Marilyn said. "Not once that document takes effect." I sank into the chair. "He wouldn't do that to me," I said quietly. Marilyn didn't argue. "Elaine," she said gently, "people often convince themselves they're doing the right thing when control is involved, especially when fear is mixed in." Fear. That word echoed. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You bring the document to my office, today, and you don't tell your son." I agreed, hung up, and sat there staring at the paper for a long time. Every memory I had of Caleb seemed to replay differently now. Moments that once felt like care suddenly felt like steps. He'd offered to manage my bills, suggested consolidating accounts, encouraged me to let him handle the details. At the time, it felt like relief. Now it felt like preparation. By noon, I was sitting across from Marilyn's desk. She read the document slowly, marking sections with a yellow pen. She didn't rush, didn't sigh, just read. "This is not a standard assistance agreement," she said. "It's comprehensive," meaning it's designed to give broad control without ongoing oversight. I swallowed. "Could he move me?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, "if he deemed it necessary." "Without asking me?" She met my eyes. "Yes." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Why would he need that?" I asked. Marilyn leaned back slightly. "Has your son been asking about your assets?" I hesitated. "He's asked questions about the house, savings, what happens later." She nodded. "This document allows access without delay. It removes obstacles." I left her office shaken. That evening, Caleb called. "Did you sign it?" he asked, skipping any greeting. "No," I said. Silence. "Why not?" he demanded. "I wanted to understand it better," I replied evenly. "You didn't need to involve anyone else," he snapped. "I did, because it involves me." His tone changed. "You don't trust me," he said. "I trust you. That doesn't mean I stop thinking." He exhaled sharply. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I replied. "You did." He hung up. The next day, my bank called. They asked to confirm a request for expanded access, a request I hadn't made. I called Marilyn immediately. "He's trying again, without your signature." That's when the fear set in. Not panic, awareness. This wasn't about convenience. It was about positioning himself before anyone could question it. 2 days later, I received mail addressed to Caleb as my representative. I hadn't agreed to that. And suddenly, the urgency made sense. He wasn't waiting for permission. He was assuming it. That night, Marilyn called me after hours. "Elaine," she said, her voice tense, "I found something in the records." "What is it?" I asked. "It's another document. And this one," she added quietly, "was already signed." I drove to Marilyn's office that same evening. She'd asked me to come alone, and that detail sat heavy in my mind the entire drive. The sky had darkened earlier than expected, clouds stacked low and gray, the kind that press down on you even when you're inside a car with the windows up. Marilyn was still at her desk when I arrived, her coat hung over the back of her chair, purse untouched on the floor. She looked up as soon as I stepped inside. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said. She didn't smile. That scared me more than anything else. She slid a thin folder across the desk toward me. Unlike the thick stack Caleb had brought, this one was narrow, precise, intentional. "This was filed 3 weeks ago," she said. I stared at the folder without touching it. "Filed where?" I asked. "With a financial institution you've used for years," she replied, "under your name." My heart began to pound. "I didn't sign anything," I said. "I know, that's why I pulled the record." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. At the bottom of the page was a signature. My signature, or something close enough that anyone glancing quickly would accept it without question. The room felt suddenly too warm. "I've never seen this," I whispered. "This document authorizes limited access, not full authority, but enough to open doors." "To doors to what?" I asked. She didn't rush her answer. "To accounts, to conversations, to records." I felt lightheaded. "You're saying my son?" I began. "I'm saying someone signed this without your informed consent," she said, "and whoever did it knows you well." I closed my eyes. There were moments, small and forgettable at the time. Papers passed across tables, forms filled out later, times when I'd trusted him to handle things because it was easier than squinting through legal language.
Trust leaves fingerprints. Is this illegal? I asked. It's complicated, but it's concerning. I gripped the arms of the chair. What happens now? Now we protect you before this escalates. She explained the steps carefully, revoking access, issuing formal notices, placing additional safeguards. None of it felt dramatic, but all of it felt final. This isn't about punishing your son, she added gently. It's about making sure your voice is preserved. I nodded. When I got home that night, my phone was buzzing. Caleb. I let it ring. He called again, then again. Finally, I answered. Why are you doing this? He demanded. Doing what? I asked. Running around behind my back, he snapped. I'm protecting myself, I replied. You don't need protection, he said sharply. You need help. I didn't ask for this kind of help, I said. There was a pause. If you don't sign, he said slowly, things are going to get harder for you. My stomach dropped. Is that a threat? I asked. He laughed lightly. Don't twist my words. I'm hearing them clearly, I replied. He sighed. I just mean I won't be able to smooth things over the way I have. With who? I asked. He didn't answer. The next few days were strange. My pharmacy called to confirm a change I hadn't made. A utility company asked about billing preferences I didn't recognize. A neighbor mentioned a man asking questions about my house. Each time, Caleb claimed it was a misunderstanding. Each time, Marilyn said it wasn't. One afternoon, I came home to find a brochure in my mailbox. Planning for the next chapter, it read. Assisted living options, smiling faces, clean hallways. I hadn't requested it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the sentence from the document over and over in my mind. Full and irrevocable authority. It finally clicked. This wasn't about helping me later. It was about preparing now. The next morning, Marilyn called again. Elaine, she said, your son has submitted another request. For what? I asked. To be recognized as your decision-maker, citing concern. Concern. That word felt heavy. I didn't agree to that, I said. I know, but he's pushing. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. He's not asking any more, I said quietly. No, Marilyn agreed. He isn't. That afternoon, I made a call of my own. Not to a lawyer. To someone Caleb didn't know existed. The woman answered on the first ring. After I finished explaining, she didn't sound surprised. Instead, she said, You're not the first parent to call me with this story. And that's when I realized my situation wasn't unique.
The woman's name was Janine Crowell. Her voice was calm, steady, and practiced in a way that told me she'd heard stories like mine before. Not once or twice, but many times. She didn't interrupt while I spoke. She didn't rush me. She let the silence sit when I needed to breathe. When I finished, she said, Elaine, what you're describing follows a very clear pattern. That sentence alone made my stomach tighten. There's a pattern? I asked. Yes, she replied. It usually starts with help, then convenience, then quiet control. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wall across from me. I thought I was imagining things, I admitted. I kept telling myself I was being suspicious, that I should be grateful. That's very common, Janine said, especially for parents. You raised him. You don't expect to need protection from him. No, I said softly. I don't. She explained what she did for a living. She worked as an independent advocate, someone who helped older adults make sure their wishes stayed documented, respected, and visible, especially when family dynamics became complicated. People think these situations always involve bad intentions, she said. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. but the outcome can be the same either way." "What outcome?" I asked. "Loss of voice," she replied. "Loss of agency. Loss of choice." The words landed hard. "What should I do?" I asked. "You need to make your wishes undeniable," Janine said. "Clear, documented, witnessed, and you need someone neutral in your corner." She recommended formal statements, written preferences about my finances, my home, my care, things I'd always assumed were understood, but had never actually put on paper. Unspoken expectations are easy to override. Written ones are not. That afternoon, I met Marilyn again. Janine joined us on speakerphone. Together, they walked me through each step, slowly, carefully. I signed new documents, ones I read line by line, ones that were explained in plain language, ones that named Marilyn Holt as my temporary representative if I ever needed one. Not my son. I didn't tell Caleb, not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I needed space to think without pressure. That evening, he showed up anyway, unannounced. I heard his car before the knock. Same 3 firm raps. When I opened the door, he didn't smile. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside. "We do." He walked in like he still owned the place, like nothing had changed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, standing near the table. "People are asking questions." "Yes," I replied, "they are." "You didn't have to get outsiders involved," he snapped. "They aren't outsiders to me," I said calmly. "They're professionals." He laughed under his breath. "You're letting them scare you." "No," I replied. "I'm letting them explain things you didn't." His jaw tightened. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "By not telling me the truth?" I asked. Silence. I looked at him and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Not anger, not concern, but frustration, like I'd ruined a plan he thought was already settled. "I raised you to speak honestly, even when it's uncomfortable." "You wouldn't have understood," he replied. That sentence hurt more than anything else. "I understand enough to say no," I said. He shook his head. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe, but it will be my regret." He left without another word. 2 days later, Marilyn called. "Elaine, your son has retained legal counsel." I wasn't surprised. "He's questioning your capacity." My chest tightened. "On what basis?" I asked. "Concern," which is vague and strategic. Janine called later that evening. "This is where people panic, but you shouldn't." "I'm not panicking," I replied. "I'm angry." "That's allowed," she said gently. "Just don't let it rush you." The next week, a letter arrived. An evaluation had been requested. Not by me, by Caleb. I sat at the kitchen table holding the envelope, my hands steady despite the weight of it. He wasn't asking anymore. He was pushing forward, assuming the system would favor him. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about whether I was capable. It was about who would be believed. The evaluation was scheduled for the following Monday, but what Caleb didn't know was this. I wouldn't be walking into that room alone, and the person sitting beside me knew exactly what questions mattered.
The evaluation was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp on Monday morning. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to remind myself that I still had the ability to show up on my own terms. I chose my outfit carefully. Nothing fancy, just neat, comfortable, familiar. I wore the same necklace I'd worn for years, the one my husband gave me before Caleb was born. Caleb's car was already there when I pulled into the parking lot. He stood near the entrance, phone in hand, pacing like someone rehearsing what they planned to say. When he saw me, he straightened, confidence settling over him like a jacket. "You didn't have to bring anyone," he said, glancing at Marilyn Holt beside me. "I wanted to," I replied. His lips pressed into a thin line. "Of course you did." Inside, the room was plain, neutral walls, a round table, a clipboard resting neatly in the center. It didn't feel intimidating, but it didn't feel warm either. It felt official. The evaluator introduced herself as Dr. Helen Morris. She was calm, direct, no wasted words. She explained the process clearly. Questions, conversation, observation. No tricks, no traps. Caleb didn't seem satisfied with that. "She forgets things," he said almost immediately. "She gets confused. She needs help managing details." Dr. Morris raised her hand gently. "I'll ask the questions," she said. She turned to me. "Elaine, do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes," I said, "because my son believes I can't make decisions for myself." Caleb shifted in his chair. "And do you agree with that assessment?" she asked. "No," I said, simply. She nodded and continued. She asked about my daily routine, my finances, my medical history, my preferences, where I lived, how I wanted to live. I answered honestly, not perfectly, not quickly, but clearly. When I needed a moment, I took one. Dr. Morris didn't rush me. Halfway through, she asked Caleb to step outside. He looked startled. "Why?" "Because this portion is private," she replied evenly. The door closed behind him. Dr. Morris leaned forward. "Has anyone pressured you to sign documents you didn't fully understand?" "Yes," I said. "Has anyone attempted to act on your behalf without your permission?" "Yes." "Do you feel capable of expressing your wishes?" "Yes." "And do you feel safe doing so?" I paused. "I do now," I said. She smiled faintly. When Caleb was invited back in, the energy had changed. Dr. Morris addressed both of us. "Elaine demonstrates clear understanding, consistent preferences, and sound judgment. There is no indication she lacks decision-making capacity." Caleb stared at her. "So that's it?" he asked. "That's it," she replied. Outside, he confronted me. "You think you've won," he said sharply. "I didn't come here to win. I came to be heard." "You just made things harder," he snapped. "I made them clearer," I said. 2 days later, Marilyn called. "All prior authorizations have been revoked," she said. "Banks, utilities, medical providers, everyone's been notified." I felt lighter than I had in weeks. "And Caleb?" I asked. "He withdrew his request," she replied, quietly. That evening, a message came through on my phone. I was only trying to help. I didn't reply, because help doesn't come with pressure, and love doesn't silence someone's voice. But the story still wasn't finished. A week later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note, and the words on that page finally explained why my son had pushed so hard, so fast.
The envelope sat in my mailbox like it had been waiting for me. No return address, no stamp, just my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. Caleb's. I didn't open it right away. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and made myself a cup of tea. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like something heavy had settled there. When I finally unfolded the paper, there was no legal language, no formal tone, just words written quickly, uneven in places. "Mom, I didn't mean for things to go this far." I sat down. He wrote about pressure, about feeling overwhelmed, about watching friends struggle to manage their parents' lives and convincing himself that acting early was smarter than waiting. I thought if I handled things now, it would be easier later. Easier for who, I wondered. Then I read the line that made everything fall into place. I didn't think you'd push back. I didn't cry. What I felt was something quieter and stronger. Clarity. Caleb hadn't seen me as incapable, he'd seen me as predictable. Someone who would trust, someone who wouldn't question, someone who would eventually step aside. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with the rest of the paperwork, not to keep as evidence, but as a reminder. The following weeks were calm in a way that felt earned. Marilyn helped finalize everything. Clear boundaries, written permissions, regular reviews, no assumptions, no shortcuts. Janine checked in once more. You did something many people don't. You spoke up before it was too late. Caleb kept his distance at first. Then one afternoon, he asked if we could talk. We sat on the porch, the same porch where he'd once done homework while I cooked dinner inside. I crossed a line, he said. I see that now. I nodded. Intent doesn't erase impact. He swallowed. I don't want to lose you. I said, you won't, as long as you remember I'm still here. We're rebuilding, slowly, carefully, on my terms. I still make my own decisions. I still read every document. And when someone says, just sign here, I smile, because now I know better. What Caleb still doesn't know is this. There was one more document, one I signed quietly, intentionally, and without telling him, and it ensures this never happens again.
The document I signed wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no confrontations, no warnings delivered with shaking hands. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of afternoon that feels suspended between errands and dinner. The house was quiet. Sunlight rested on the kitchen floor like it always had. Marilyn sat across from me at the table, glasses low on her nose, flipping through the pages one final time. This one is different, she said, because it doesn't take anything away. It just makes things clear. Clarity. That word had become important to me. What does it do, exactly? I asked. It outlines your intentions, she said, not just legally, but practically. It states who you trust, when you trust them, and under what conditions. And if someone disagrees, I asked, then they have to explain why, in writing. I smiled faintly. That alone felt powerful. The document spelled out my preferences in plain language, where I wanted to live, how I wanted decisions made, what mattered to me beyond money and property. It also named someone, not Caleb, someone independent, someone with no emotional stake in my assets or my history. Marilyn watched me carefully as I signed. This doesn't mean you don't love your son, she said. I know. It means I love myself, too. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The kind of sleep where you wake up unsure what day it is, only certain that you're safe. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Not perfect, just honest. Caleb and I spoke more cautiously now. He no longer assumed. He asked. Sometimes awkwardly, sometimes stiffly, but he asked. It was progress. One afternoon, Caleb helped me replace a broken light fixture. He waited for my instruction instead of taking over. Tell me where you want it, he said. I noticed the effort. Right there, I replied. He nodded and followed through without comment. That moment mattered more than any apology. A few weeks later, a neighbor stopped me while I was tending my garden. You seem lighter, she said. I laughed softly. I feel steadier. That was the truth. I hadn't taken control from anyone. I'd simply taken it back. I began volunteering again,
joined a book group I'd put off for years, started driving myself to appointments instead of waiting. Small things, but small things add up. One evening, Caleb asked me something unexpected. "What would you want if something ever happened?" he asked, quietly. I didn't bristle this time. "I want my voice to matter, even when I'm not in the room." He nodded. "I understand that now," he said. I believed him. But trust, once tested, rebuilds slowly, and that was okay. A month later, I received a letter confirming everything was finalized. I read it twice, then I folded it and placed it somewhere safe, because it meant one thing. No one would ever be able to slide a paper across a table and take my life out of my hands again.
The letter arrived on a Friday. Plain envelope, typed address. Nothing that would have caught my attention a year ago. I almost set it aside with the rest of the mail, but something told me to open it right away. Inside was confirmation that everything was finalized. Every document, every safeguard, every boundary. I read it slowly. Then I read it again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to feel what certainty sounded like on paper. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer where I now kept all important things. Not hidden, just organized, exactly where I could find them. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the street the way I always had. Kids riding bikes, a delivery truck passing by, a neighbor waving as she walked her dog. Nothing looked different, but everything was. I thought back to that morning, the paper, the pen, my son's voice saying, "Just sign here." At the time, it felt small, routine, almost harmless. That's how these moments disguise themselves. They don't arrive with alarms or warnings. They arrive wrapped in familiarity, in trust, in love. Caleb stopped by later that evening. He didn't bring paperwork this time, just groceries I hadn't asked for, and a quiet kind of presence. We sat at the table where it had all begun. "I've been thinking about that day," he said. "So have I replied. He looked down. "I didn't realize how much I was assuming." "I know, that's why I had to stop it." He nodded. "I get that now." We didn't need to say more, because some lessons don't need repeating. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. There were still misunderstandings, still moments where old habits tried to resurface, but now everything had a pause built into it, a question, a conversation, a choice, and that made all the difference. I still live in my home, I still decide how my days unfold, I still speak for myself. And when someone hands me a paper, any paper, I read it, fully, carefully, with my glasses on. That one sentence didn't end my independence. It saved it, because it reminded me of something I should have never forgotten. Being older doesn't mean being invisible. Being helped doesn't mean being controlled. And trust doesn't mean surrender. It means partnership. And that's something you should always agree to, not sign away. If you feel comfortable, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on this video. It helps these quiet stories reach the people who might need them most. You can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear more stories like this. Stories about love, endurance, and the things we carry longer than we should. And if you want to, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read them, truly. Knowing this story traveled farther than my living room gives me more comfort than you might imagine. Thank you for sitting with me. Take care of yourself, and take care of the people you love.